The tribunal chamber hummed with an eerie, calculated stillness, the kind that often followed the rendering of a decision that no one dared question. Mara Voss sat at her assigned place, a solitary figure in a sea of alien faces, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Around her, the room was a swirl of colors, bioluminescent tentacles, scaled hides, and chittering appendages that spoke in 100 languages at once. The verdict had been delivered. The Exora crystals in the Gamma Eridani region, the lead adjudicator declared, her voice a silky monotone, are to be transferred to the rightful jurisdiction of the Altrician hegemony, effective immediately. Humanity's claims have been deemed invalid. The words struck like a hammer. Mara's breath caught in her throat, though she willed her expression to remain calm. No one in the chamber seemed surprised, least of all the Altricians, whose leader, a gelatinous creature named Virak, let out a gurgling sound that approximated smug laughter. Mara's fingers dug into her palm, the faint sting of her nails grounding her in the moment. Virak's translucent form pulsed as it addressed the tribunal. We thank the Concord of sapient species for upholding the principles of fairness and civility. We knew humanity would understand its place in the greater order. The insult was veiled but unmistakable. Mara rose from her seat, her voice slicing through the heavy air. Humanity's place, Ambassador Virak, is wherever we choose to make it. This tribunal's decision is noted. The chamber erupted into murmurs, and Mara took a calculated moment to let the tension brew. She scanned the faces before her, some amused, others disdainful, and a rare few looking away, perhaps in sympathy or fear. The latter made her pause. Fear. Not respect. Not understanding. Just fear of what humans might do. The thought twisted in her gut. Ambassador Voss, the adjudicator interrupted, her voice laced with irritation, you will respect the ruling of this body. Civility is paramount in these proceedings. Civility, Mara said, the word tasting bitter in her mouth. Of course. We've learned so much about that since joining the Concord. But let me ask, what happens when civility becomes a weapon? When it's wielded against fairness? Against survival? Your insinuations are unbecoming, Virak hissed, its gelatinous body vibrating. Humanity is lucky to have even been granted a voice here. Mara tilted her head, smiling faintly. Yes, lucky. And luck, as we all know, tends to run out. The adjudicator banged her gavel, signaling an end to the discussion. The chamber dispersed, leaving Mara standing alone amidst the dimming lights. Her comm device buzzed faintly against her wrist, a message from Earth's High Council. She read the 3 words on the display, drop the act. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. They wouldn't, she thought. They couldn't. But even as the denial formed, she knew it wasn't true. The act had always been temporary. Back in her quarters, Mara paced the sterile room. The walls were bare, save for a small Terran flag hanging near her desk, a reminder of who she was and what she represented. A second buzz from her comm interrupted her thoughts. It wasn't a message this time but a code. Her heart sank. Protocol null. Her mind raced as she connected the implications. This wasn't a decision made lightly. Humanity had spent decades playing along, learning the Concord's systems, its weaknesses, its blind spots. They had mimicked the civility required to be part of this galactic society. But underneath, the fire never went out. Earth's leaders had prepared for this moment since the day humanity joined the Concord, knowing the masquerade would eventually end. Another buzz. This time, a direct link to Commander Ortega, leader of Earth's hidden fleet. His face appeared on the holographic display, hardened and unyielding. Mara, he said without preamble, you've been briefed. I have, she replied, her voice steady. I need confirmation. Are we truly doing this? We are, Ortega said. The Altricians think they've won. The Concord thinks we're cornered. Let's show them what it means to underestimate humanity. Mara exhaled, the weight of the decision settling in. An auroral zenith? You'll lead, Ortega said. Take the station. Cut their communication lines. Make it clean. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Mara alone with her thoughts. She looked at the flag on the wall, its vibrant blue and green reminding her of Earth. Of home. And of what she was willing to do to protect it. The first move was subtle, almost imperceptible to the station's non-human residents. Power fluctuations in critical areas. A sudden lockdown of auxiliary hangars. Security drones rerouted. To most, it would seem like technical difficulties, but Mara knew better. She had initiated the sequence herself. Her team, a small but efficient group of human operatives, moved silently through the labyrinthine corridors of auroral zenith. Each of them had been handpicked for their expertise, engineers, hackers, former soldiers like herself. They worked with precision, their actions synchronized like a symphony. As Mara reached the station's primary communication hub, she encountered her first resistance. A patrol of Concord enforcers, towering insectoid creatures armed with plasma pikes, blocked her path. She held up a hand, feigning compliance. "Ambassador Voss," one of them chittered, "you are not authorized to be here." Mara smiled, stepping closer. "You're right," she said, her voice dripping with false humility. "I'm not authorized. But I'm here anyway." The enforcers didn't have time to react. Mara's team emerged from the shadows, their movements swift and decisive. The fight was over in seconds, the enforcers incapacitated before they could sound an alarm. "Secure the area," Mara ordered. "We have 10 minutes before they notice." Her team sprang into action, hacking into the communication array and rerouting the station's signals. Mara watched as the screens flickered, her reflection staring back at her in the glass. She didn't see a diplomat anymore. She saw a soldier. The final phase began with a single broadcast. Mara stood in front of the camera, her image transmitted across the station and beyond. "To the Concord of sapient species," she began, her voice calm but firm. "Humanity has abided by your rules. We have adhered to your standards. We have respected your demands for civility. But today, we make it clear, we will not respect injustice." She leaned closer, her eyes burning with determination. "You've mistaken our restraint for weakness. That ends now." Across the galaxy, humanity's fleets emerged from hiding, their ships cutting through the void like blades. On auroral zenith, Mara's team seized control of the station's vital systems, locking out Concord authorities. The act was no longer a performance. It was a declaration. And humanity, at last, had stopped pretending. The alarms blared across auroral zenith, their shrill tone cutting through the station's normally tranquil hum. Mara Voss stood in the nerve center of the communication hub, her operatives working furiously at the consoles. Sparks flew as overrides were executed, systems redirected, and entire sectors of the station fell under human control. Despite the chaos, Mara's voice remained calm as she barked commands into her comlink. "Section Gamma 12 is secure," came a report from one of her field leaders. "Concord enforcers are scrambling, but they're disorganized." "What's next?" "Hold your position and reinforce the perimeter," Mara replied. "We don't need to win every room. Just the ones that matter." The plan was moving faster than she'd anticipated. Humanity had spent years learning the station's architecture, its vulnerabilities. Now, they were exploiting every one of them. The Concord had grown complacent, relying too much on their automated systems and the belief that humans would never dare step out of line. Today, that illusion was shattered. Mara turned to Lucas, her lead engineer, who was furiously typing commands into a terminal. "How long until we have full control of the station's power grid?" Lucas didn't look up, his fingers flying across the interface. "Another 3 minutes, maybe less. These systems are archaic. It's like they didn't think anyone would ever try to take them offline." "They didn't," Mara said flatly. "They thought civilized meant complacent. They forgot we've been playing their game for decades." Before Lucas could reply, a muffled explosion rocked the station, shaking the floor beneath them. Dust fell from the ceiling, and Mara instinctively reached for the sidearm holstered at her waist. The comlink crackled again. Voss, we've got movement on Deck 7, another operative reported. Altrician troops, heavy resistance. They're deploying containment drones. Mara cursed under her breath. The Altricians had always been opportunists, and now they were clearly hoping to turn the chaos to their advantage. She toggled the comm link to the entire network. Listen up, she said, her voice cutting through the static. If you encounter Altrician forces, you are authorized to engage. No quarter. They've crossed the line, and we're showing them what happens when you back us into a corner. Her words hung heavy in the air, but no one questioned her. The team knew what was at stake. Humanity's survival had always depended on its willingness to do what others wouldn't. Minutes later, Lucas straightened, a triumphant grin breaking across his face. Power grid is ours. We've rerouted the primary systems. They'll have to manually access backups if they want control again, and that'll take hours. Good, Mara said. Let's make sure they don't get those hours. She turned toward the central display, where a map of auroral zenith glowed in vivid detail. Sections of the station blinked red, areas still under Concord control. But the pockets of blue, representing human-secured zones, were spreading fast. They were winning. Still, Mara knew the hardest part was yet to come. A new alert flashed on the screen, drawing everyone's attention. Mara's stomach tightened as she read the message. The Concord's elite peacekeeping forces, the Celestial Wardens, had entered the station. They were fast, brutal, and unwaveringly loyal to the Concord's ideals. Humanity had studied their tactics for years, but knowing their strategies didn't make them less dangerous. Wardens are deploying on Deck 5, Mara announced. We can't let them gain a foothold. Lucas, I need you to flood the secondary corridors with ion pulses. Disable their drones and force them into choke points. Lucas nodded and got to work. Mara turned to the rest of her team. Everyone else, hold your positions. The Wardens will push hard, but they don't know the station like we do. Use the terrain against them. She grabbed her sidearm and activated her personal comm link. I'm heading to Deck 5. If we lose ground there, this whole operation falls apart. Commander, you shouldn't, one of her operatives began, but Mara cut them off. This isn't a debate, she said. I've led troops into worse than this. Keep the hub secure. That's an order. The corridors leading to Deck 5 were a labyrinth of flickering lights and echoing footsteps. Mara moved quickly but carefully, her senses heightened. The sound of distant gunfire reached her ears, followed by the unmistakable hum of containment drones. When she arrived at the choke point, she found a squad of human fighters pinned down behind a makeshift barricade. What's the situation? She asked, sliding into cover beside them. One of the soldiers, a young woman with a plasma rifle, gestured toward the corridor ahead. Wardens are dug in about 50 meters up. They've got shields and suppressive fire. We can't get close. Mara peeked over the barricade, taking in the scene. The Wardens were exactly as she'd expected, tall, imposing figures clad in shimmering, adaptive armor. Their energy shields flickered as they absorbed incoming fire, and their drones hovered overhead, scanning for targets. All right, Mara said, formulating a plan on the fly. We can't outgun them, but we don't need to. I need a distraction. The young soldier frowned. Distraction? Trust me, Mara said, her tone leaving no room for argument. She pointed to the others. You two, keep their attention on this corridor. Lay down suppressive fire, but don't expose yourselves. You, she said, looking at the soldier with the rifle, you're coming with me. Together, they slipped into a side passage, moving parallel to the main corridor. The sounds of battle grew louder as they closed the distance. When they reached a maintenance hatch, Mara gestured for the soldier to cover her. She pried it open and climbed inside, the confined space forcing her to crawl on her hands and knees. Where does this lead? The soldier whispered. Right behind them, Mara replied, her voice grim. Stay close and be ready to move. When they emerged, they were mere meters from the Warden's position. The soldiers hadn't noticed them, their focus entirely on the firefight in front of them. Mara raised her sidearm and fired a single shot at one of the hovering drones. It exploded in a shower of sparks, drawing the warden's attention. "Now!" Mara shouted. The young soldier opened fire, her plasma rifle tearing through the weakened shields of the nearest warden. The rest of the human squad seized the opportunity, surging forward and overwhelming the disoriented enemy. In moments, the corridor was silent, save for the heavy breathing of the victors. Mara stood amidst the wreckage, her gaze hard. "They're testing us," she said. "Let's make sure they regret it." The soldier beside her nodded, her expression a mix of awe and determination. "What now?" "Now," Mara said, holstering her weapon, "we push harder. They think we're desperate. Let's show them we're just getting started." The bridge of the Celestial Dawn, humanity's flagship, was bathed in the cold glow of tactical displays, each screen showing the spreading chaos across auroral zenith. Commander Ortega stood at the center of it all, his presence commanding and deliberate. He watched as his fleet carried out precise maneuvers across the galactic expanse, systematically dismantling the Concorde's lines. Every strike was calculated, every move a step closer to unseating an order that had dismissed humanity as insignificant. "Status report," Ortega demanded, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship. A young officer turned from her console, her expression tight. "Concorde fleets are regrouping near the Triarch Nebula. They're pulling assets from neighboring systems, but our interference teams have disrupted their comms. It'll take them hours to coordinate." "Good," Ortega said, his lips curling into a faint smile. "Keep them in the dark. Fear thrives in silence." The comlink buzzed on his wrist, and Ortega glanced down. Mara's face appeared, her features sharp with intensity. "Deck 5 is secure," she reported without preamble. "The wardens are scattered, but they're adapting. If we don't press the advantage, they'll regroup." "Understood," Ortega said. "You've got reinforcements en route, but don't wait for them. Take the initiative. The longer we keep them reactive, the better." Mara hesitated, her brow furrowing. "They're bringing in heavier units. I saw movement near the station's central hub. If they dig in there..." "They won't," Ortega interrupted. "Because you won't let them. You're the tip of the spear, Mara. Drive it deep." She nodded, the connection cutting off. Ortega turned back to his tactical display, his mind already shifting to the broader picture. The Concorde was vast, but it had grown brittle, its unity more illusion than reality. All it had taken was a single spark to expose the fractures. "Admiral Lysar's fleet is breaking formation," the officer at Tactical announced, her tone laced with urgency. "It looks like they're retreating toward the Algor Nexus." Ortega leaned closer to the display, his eyes narrowing. "No," he said, almost to himself. "They're not retreating. They're regrouping for a counteroffensive. Send strike teams to harass their flanks. Keep them guessing." "Yes, sir," the officer replied, her fingers dancing across the console. Across the station, Mara moved through the corridors like a shadow, her team close behind. The tension was palpable, each step bringing them closer to the central hub. It was a calculated risk, pushing deeper into enemy territory, but she knew hesitation was not an option. "Hold here," Mara whispered, signaling her team to halt as they approached a wide junction. She peered around the corner, her heart sinking at the sight. A squad of wardens was positioned at the far end, their armor gleaming under the flickering lights. Behind them, engineers worked furiously to fortify the hub's entrances. "Options," one of her operatives murmured, his voice barely audible. Mara's mind raced. A direct assault would be suicide, but they couldn't afford to let the wardens hold this position. She glanced at the ceiling, noting the exposed maintenance ducts above. A plan began to form. "We go up," she said. "Lucas, get those vents open. We'll drop in behind them." The team moved quickly, their training evident in every motion. Within moments, they were crawling through the narrow ducts, the metallic surfaces cold against their skin. Mara led the way, her senses honed, every sound amplified in the confined space. Below them, the wardens stood in disciplined formation, their weapons ready. Mara could hear their voices, distorted but clear enough to catch fragments of their conversation. They were expecting reinforcements, confident in their ability to hold the line. Not this time, Mara thought. She signaled her team to halt and carefully position herself above the group. With a swift motion, she kicked open the vent and dropped into their midst. The shock was immediate, the wardens spinning to face her, but she was faster. Her sidearm barked twice, the shots finding weak points in their armor. "Engage," she shouted, and her team followed, descending like thunder. The confined space erupted into chaos, plasma bolts slicing through the air as the humans tore into their enemy. The wardens fought back fiercely, their precision and discipline a testament to their training, but they were unprepared for the raw, relentless aggression of humanity. Within minutes, it was over. The last warden fell, their shimmering armor darkened with scorch marks. Mara's team stood amidst the wreckage, their breaths heavy but victorious. "Clear the engineers," Mara ordered, her voice sharp. "Secure this position and get me aligned to Ortega." One of the operatives nodded, moving to set up a comm link. Mara stepped over the fallen wardens, her gaze hard as she surveyed the room. The hub was theirs, but she knew it wouldn't be long before the Concord mounted another assault. The comlink activated, and Ortega's face appeared, his expression unreadable. "Status?" "The hub is ours," Mara said. "But they'll hit back hard. We need more than reinforcements. We need a message." Ortega raised an eyebrow. "A message?" "Something they can't ignore," Mara said. "They've underestimated us because we've let them. It's time to show them what we're capable of." Ortega's smile was cold. "I couldn't agree more. I'll redirect assets to your position. Hold the hub at all costs." The connection cut, and Mara turned to her team. "You heard him. Fortify this position. The wardens will come, and when they do, we'll show them why humanity stopped pretending." Her words sparked a renewed determination in her team, their movements sharp and purposeful as they prepared for the next wave. Mara stood at the center, her mind already 2 steps ahead. The Concord had forced humanity's hand, but they had no idea what they'd unleashed. For the first time in decades, Mara felt truly alive. The war room on the Celestial Dawn pulsed with activity as officers barked orders and tactical maps shifted in real time. Ortega stood unmoving in the eye of the storm, his gaze fixed on a glowing holographic display that showed auroral zenith ablaze with blue and red markers. Humanity's forces had expanded their foothold, but the Concord wasn't backing down. The coalition fleet was mobilizing, converging on the station with a force that could overwhelm even Earth's meticulously prepared contingencies. "Commander," an officer called out, her voice tight, "the Altrician flagship is broadcasting a wideband message. They're demanding unconditional surrender and threatening orbital bombardment." Ortega didn't flinch. "Patch it through." The holographic display flickered, and the bulbous, translucent form of Virak, the Altrician ambassador, filled the space. Its gelatinous body rippled with irritation as its resonant voice filled the room. "Humans," Virak hissed, "your insolence has reached its limit. Cease your aggression immediately, or we will raise auroral zenith to ashes." The Concord's patience is non-infinite. Ortega's response was measured, calm. "Virak, your threats are as transparent as you are. If you truly believed in the strength of the Concord, you wouldn't be speaking to me now. You'd already be firing." Virak's body quivered, its voice rising. "You misunderstand your position, Commander. Humanity's defiance ends here. You will." Ortega cut the transmission with a flick of his hand, his expression hardening. "Send a reply. Tell them they've already lost control of the station, and if they think orbital bombardment will scare us, they don't know what we've prepared." "Sir," another officer interrupted, "Mara Voss is on a secure channel. Put her through." Mara's face appeared, streaked with soot but unyielding. Her team was battered but alive, holding their ground in the central hub. Behind her, the flickering lights cast deep shadows, but her resolve was undimmed. "Commander," she began, her voice clipped, "the Wardens are regrouping, and they're throwing everything they've got at us. We've intercepted chatter, reinforcements are coming from the fleet above. They're planning to retake the hub at all costs." "Understood," Ortega replied. "You're holding the linchpin, Mara. If the hub falls, we lose control of the station." "It won't fall," she said firmly. "But we need more than just defensive positions. Let me take the fight to them." Ortega studied her for a moment. "You have an idea?" "Yes," she said. "The station's secondary reactors are directly below their staging ground. If we overload them, we can cut off their reinforcements and force the remaining troops into retreat." "Overloading the reactors risks the station's integrity," Ortega warned. "I know," Mara said. "But we don't have a choice. If we wait for them to hit us, we'll lose. We take the risk, or we lose everything." Ortega nodded slowly. "Do it. I'll have engineering teams on standby to stabilize the station. Whatever happens, Mara, make it count." Mara disconnected without another word, turning to her team. They were battered, their armor scorched and their faces marked with exhaustion, but their eyes burned with the same fire she felt. "We've got one shot at this," she said, pulling up a schematic of the station. "The reactors are here, beneath the enemy's staging ground. Lucas, you're with me. The rest of you, hold the hub. If they break through before we're done, everything falls apart." Lucas nodded, grabbing his tools. The others exchanged grim looks but saluted. They knew the stakes, and there was no room for doubt. As Mara and Lucas moved through the winding corridors toward the reactors, the sounds of distant combat echoed around them. The station felt alive, its systems groaning under the strain of the battle. Lucas glanced at Mara as they ran, his voice breaking the tense silence. "You think this will work?" "It has to," Mara replied. "If we play by their rules, we lose. This is about showing them we make our own." They reached the reactor control room, a cavernous space filled with towering machinery. Lucas immediately began accessing the control panels, his fingers flying over the keys. Mara stood guard, her weapon at the ready, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. "Almost there," Lucas muttered. "Give me 30 seconds." The door behind them slammed open, and Mara spun, her weapon firing before she could think. Concord enforcers poured in, their armor reflecting the reactor's glow. Mara ducked behind a console, returning fire with practiced precision. "Lucas, how much longer?" she shouted, her voice barely audible over the cacophony. 15 seconds, he called back, his voice strained. "Just keep them off me." Mara moved with deadly efficiency, her shots finding weak points in the enforcer's armor. But there were too many, and she knew she couldn't hold them forever. Her comlink crackled to life, Ortega's voice cutting through the noise. "Mara, what's your status?" "Busy," she snapped, firing another round. "We're at the reactors. Give us another minute." "You don't have a minute," Ortega said. "The fleet's preparing to launch boarding pods. If they land, the station's lost." Mara clenched her teeth, firing again. "We're almost done. Just hold them off a little longer." Lucas let out a triumphant shout. "It's ready." Overload sequence initiated. "We've got 2 minutes before detonation." "Then we're leaving," Mara said, grabbing his arm. "Fall back." The two of them ran, the enforcers hot on their heels. The corridors shook as the reactors began to destabilize, the walls cracking and groaning under the pressure. Mara's comlink crackled again. "Mara, did you set the charges?" Ortega asked. "They're going off now," she replied. "The Wardens won't have anything left to regroup around." "Good," Ortega said. "Get out of there. We're pulling the fleet back to a defensive perimeter. If this works, the Concord will have no choice but to negotiate." Mara and Lucas reached the hub just as the first explosion rocked the station. The ground buckled beneath them, and they stumbled, but the sight before them was worth it. The enemy forces had fallen into disarray, their lines broken as the overloaded reactors consumed the staging ground in a brilliant inferno. "Hold the line!" Mara shouted to her team, taking up her position at the barricade. The remaining Concord forces, seeing their reinforcements obliterated, hesitated. For the first time, the invincible facade of the Concord had cracked. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't playing by their rules anymore. Back on the Celestial Dawn, Ortega watched the display as the Concord fleet pulled back, their forces routed. He turned to his officers, his voice steady but resolute. "Send the transmission to every Concord member," he ordered. "Tell them the age of civility is over. If they want to survive, they'll come to the table on our terms." The officers saluted, and Ortega allowed himself a rare smile. The tide had turned, and humanity's defiance would be remembered across the stars. On auroral zenith, Mara stood amidst the wreckage, her team around her. The battle wasn't over, but the day was theirs. She looked to the stars, a grim determination in her eyes. "We've stopped pretending," she said softly. "Now they'll see who we really are."